What happened to the pole sitter? And this was the big head scratcher in the whole race. Let's start with the on-track stuff that we saw, the battle for the podium later on. George Russell not happy with Charles Leclerc's driving. This is the first attempt for Russell to try and pass the Ferrari man, who turns in slightly on a shallow line for this turn one, a little bit like Norris did on Piastri, maybe a little bit more aggressive than Norris on Piastri, just tightening the corner, seeing the move late and nudging in. But I think that one is within the bounds of acceptability there for Leclerc. Russell wasn't happy with it. We could see from Charles' point of view, he's definitely checking the mirrors here, checking the right again. And then he just turns in on this shallow line. Now, conventionally, you'd be a bit further out wide and sweep in there. So he has dived in for an earlier apex. Technically, it is slightly moving in the braking zone, but we see this fairly frequently. It's not a massive rush across the track. It's just a shallow line. Technically, it's not correct. And that's why Russell wasn't happy, but we see this sort of thing being let pass all the time. The second time is a lot more aggressive from Leclerc, and this one was penalised with a 5-second penalty. Again, he checks the mirrors, and this time there is a massive dash across the circuit. This is a much more clear-cut, moving in the braking zone, erratic driving, as the FIA called it, and it's a 5-second penalty for Leclerc. For Russell, it didn't matter. He made the move cleanly anyway. But you can see here on board with George, the difficulty in this. So you've got that space, and suddenly the space is taken away. When you're braking, you're on the limit of grip. You don't have margin to do a lot of steering and keep the brake in because you're just going to have a lock-up. So it's difficult here. In the end, there is just a slight touch as Charles comes across. George doesn't want to have to start wiggling the steering because he's just going to have a lock-up and go straight on. In the end, he actually has to avoid a bit of contact and then tries to get it back. There's a bit of margin in there. He goes straight on for a little bit more than he would have liked and then gets it turned. It's too much here, quite clearly, from Leclerc, and that is why he got a 5-second penalty. Once again, we could see looking in the mirrors, and then this time he bolts across. And you can't be reactive. He's got to think, OK, George is going to go for the inside. Choose that line earlier to defend. You can't be reactive and only try and defend once you see your rival's gone for the inside, because that's moving under braking. And it's fundamentally a little bit dangerous. You can have some big crashes like that. So that's why Leclerc was given the penalty. But the bigger question is, what happened? And that is one of the questions that we have amongst many coming in about Charles Leclerc's race. How come Leclerc lost so much pace out of the blue? So there are a few theories about this, and we heard lots of chatter on the team radio. It was quite clear through the race that Leclerc was getting slower, but he looked good. He obviously took pole position on a lower downforce Ferrari. He looked good in the first stint. He looked absolutely fine in the second stint, and then the pace just dropped off a cliff in the final stint. And it did seem to be from one set of tyres to the next. So what could it possibly be for Leclerc, who said afterwards it was a chassis issue? So we're thinking it's not anything to do with the power unit by that. And there are really three possibilities for this. One is some damage that he picked up that we didn't see over a curb and possibly just damaging the floor of the car suddenly, and it coincided with the pit stop. Another one is that they made a front wing adjust at the pit stop, which they did do, and got that wrong and induced loads of oversteer perhaps, and Charles couldn't dial it back with some of his cockpit settings. The final one is a one that Mercedes picked out pretty quickly as the race was going on, which is that were Ferrari on the absolute cusp of legality, so they therefore had to crank in, add a load of tyre pressure to raise the floor of the car and not get done for too much plank wear, which is what they had in China and it's what they had in Austin with Charles Leclerc a couple of years ago. And to me, that seems the most plausible. And the data is here. So first of all, the obvious. Stint analysis, Russell versus Leclerc. First stint, clear air, and Leclerc is quicker. Second stint, it's pretty close, but overall, Leclerc still has an advantage in that stint, and they're both in clear air. The final stint shows how horrific this suddenly got for Charles and why he dropped not only out of victory contention, but off the podium. He's actually not miles away from being caught by Fernando Alonso if the race was another 10 laps, which is baffling for a guy that was checking out at the start of the race from the Aston Martin. So let's have a look at the data through it, because it is quite interesting. And Mercedes certainly have their opinion on it, and you can see exactly where their logic is coming from. First of all, plank wear. It happens at the high speed. It happens when you've got most downforce on the car. And that is end of straights as the downforce is picking up. You squash the car down to the asphalt and you're most likely to have plank wear as the car's skipping along the road. What you can see here on lap 13 very quickly is that Leclerc, who's perversely in the blue and Russell is in the red here, Leclerc has no more acceleration towards the end of the straight. He's not even picking 8th gear here. And it's the same up towards turn 4 as well. So on these longer straights, he's actually just not able to use energy deployment at the end of the straights. Now, this is Russell with a little bit of a distant slipstream, but it's Leclerc, who was a really quick car on the straights in qualifying, suddenly not having deployment for the end part of the straights. He is quick through the corners, and we see on this occasion he's nearly half a second up on Russell in the first stint, driving nicely. He's able to pick up speed through these low-speed apexes. Generally, it's a bit of give and take, but overall, it balances out to be advantage Leclerc, and he's particularly quick through the quick corner at turn 11 here. So let's have a look then at lap 35, and once again you can see that the Ferrari is missing the top speed of the Mercedes. So once again, it's energy deployment. They're both in clear air at this point. There's no traffic, there's no slipstream. The Ferrari is just not deploying energy at the end of the straight. And it's costing Leclerc a little bit of lap time. It's about 1/10 of a second into turn 1. It's a little bit more heading up towards turn 4, where Ferrari maybe have thought this is where you're most likely to do damage to the plank and grind it along the ground. But through the corners, once again, Leclerc is overall doing enough of a job, and he's up through the apex speeds once again, particularly in the high speed of turn 11. This time he's better in turn 4 as well, and he's able to find the lap time with the grip of the car. We fast forward to the final stint, and we can have a look once again. And this time is lap 48, so we're into the final stint. Russell is now catching Leclerc. First thing, the Ferrari deployment is the same. So they're still missing speed, and Leclerc is still not taking 8th gear down the main straight, and they're also missing speed up towards turn 4. So this is what we're talking about with the Ferrari not using full energy deployment on the straight. They're in a different mode, and it's meaning they're not hitting the same top speed, which is going to make Leclerc's life pretty difficult when it comes to defending as well. Only this time, he's now got no pace through the corners either. So the power unit that has been the same through the race has been okay because they've had track position and he's been quick through the corners. He's had cornering speed. In the final stint, the cornering speed completely goes for Leclerc, and we can see that with a load of oversteer. So you see the blue jagged lines, and we see it sporadically through the lap here, where Charles just fighting the rear of the car. It could be that Ferrari cranked on a load of front wing, but they don't believe they did. So then it could be that they picked up damage at this part of the race, and that's why he's just now missing a load of downforce from the floor of the car. But I do believe, at this case, it may well be down to tyre pressures. Because the only things you can change in the pit stop from a team perspective is front wing angle, which they did change, or tyre pressures. Now, normally you'd never change the tyre pressures because you'd run them as low as possible because they sort of deflate. So you have more of the tyre in contact with the asphalt, and therefore you get more grip. Pirelli mandate that you have to run to a minimum tyre pressure, and that is basically what everyone does. You can't go lower than that because it would be illegal, and Pirelli don't want it to go lower because it would maybe lose structural rigidity. So it's for safety, you have to run at the Pirelli minimum. No one would go higher than that because you'd lose grip. But if you did go higher than that, you would also raise the ride height of the car by bulging out the tyre a little bit more, lifting the floor of the car off the ground, and that would mean that you're legal. You're able to run the car at a higher ride height suddenly for the final stint of the race, but it would make you really slow because you're just getting less grip from the tyre. And to me, that is what this data kind of looks like. I can see why Mercedes looked at this and thought, that's the only thing that makes sense. Possibly is some damage in there as well, and I'm sure Ferrari will know the answer to this already, having had the car back. But I can see the logic here for Ferrari, who have been in trouble with plank wear in the past, going really aggressive with it, finding out after qualifying they may be too aggressive and having to really nurse this through the final stint of the race, maybe hoping it's difficult to overtake in Budapest. And they'd cling on for what they've already had earlier on in the race. However, the pace was just too slow. And for poor Charles Leclerc, he was defenceless and couldn't even stand on the podium.
From lap 40, around lap 40, we had a problem with the chassis. So now I've had more details about it. In the car, obviously, I had no idea what was going on. I mean, I had an idea, but it was the wrong idea because I thought it was something that was in our control. Unfortunately, we had an issue on the chassis, so I don't have much to add on that. It's just extremely frustrating when you are fighting for a win, when we had the pace that we had at the beginning of the race, and we lose absolutely everything later on. It's very frustrating.